Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. It is I, the sanctimoniously, I don't even know what I'm saying. The sanctimoniously notorious RMB here on a Sunday afternoon with this Robservations live chat number 166. Robservations is, of course, the show about something. Brought to you by my sponsor, Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products, for those men who want to look good and feel great. And as you all know, if you go to their website at Get Lucky Tiger, you can get 20% off your order of anything you buy there by punching in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity when you check out. Also, I want to remind you all that I did, in fact, drop the second episode of Living the Lucky Tiger Life, which you can see on Robservations. Robservations presents Living the Lucky Tiger Life, which I actually am having kind of fun making. I interviewed James Hills from the mantripping.com blog. And the reason I wanted to interview him is, well, one, I like his site, but two, like, you know, he writes a travel blog from a male perspective, which is kind of what, you know, Lucky Tiger or men's grooming products. So I figured if I'm going to do leading the Lucky Tiger life kind of a thing, but he does articles. There's articles on the Man Tripping blog of like where you can ride steam trains in the United States. And I thought that was cool. I mean, I thought that he had cool stuff. So I'm always on the lookout now for anybody who has an interesting website or somebody I can talk to that would fall under the title of Living the Lucky Tiger Life. So I just got out of the shower and I noticed I'm all shiny again because I'm always jumping out of the shower and jumping onto this show because I figure, you know, I want to be freshly laundered and cleaned and everything before I go on. It's a little bright. I should turn my light down a little bit, maybe a little bit. That's not even better. Anyway, so yes, welcome to this chat number 166. All of you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, welcome to chat number 166. Unbelievable that we're still here on a Sunday. As you know, I get letters. I get letters all the time to my website, theburnettwork.net, and I love your letters. They've kind of become a highlight of the show. They've made the show what it is. And today I got a letter from somebody who'd sent me a letter before. What I like now is I don't just have letter writers. I have multiple repeat letter writers. And I kind of like that because I feel like, you know, we have a personal relationship. Like I feel like Willow Yang and I are in some kind of a personal relationship, even though I've never met her and have no idea. If she called me on the phone, I would be like, hello, who's this? I don't know who you are. But it's kind of nice. And this letter, it's not a long letter, but I really liked what it had to say because I love these stories. I love when people tell me about when they fell in love with movies or when they fell in love with their favorite television show or when they fell in love with comics. Like, what was it? What was your gateway, so to speak? I mean, I don't want to make a drug allusion, but you know, what was the gateway? What was the thing that brought you into loving storytelling? Could be books too. It doesn't matter whatever it is. I love hearing those stories. And this was a great one. I believe this is from my letter writer. I know it's from this letter writer, but I believe he's written me before, but I believe he's French. And I say that, I mean, he could be from Belgium. I don't know. But his name is Alain Donois. I believe that's how you pronounce Donois. It's Donais. Donois. Donais. Alain Donais. Donais. I guess it's not Donois. It'd be Alain Donais. I hope I got that right. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, it's a great letter. Hey, Rob, I had a vivid dream recently about the summer of 1986 when I got my first car and spent the summer going to the big city with my friends to watch movies, which prompted me to write to you as I felt compelled to share these treasured memories with our movie-loving community, as I was lucky, and it was a rather fortuitous set of events that not everyone would be fortunate enough to have gone through. Growing up in a small city, which English was not the primary language, and with only one small cinema that only showed 16 millimeter prints with mono sound. Oh my God, that's hell. Hell on earth. I have only vague memories of seeing some animated and kids-friendly movies, but did not have any love for cinema. In the big city, about 40 miles from my hometown, there was a legendary old vaudeville theater of 2,000 seats, constructed at the beginning of the 1910s, that was much later converted to a 900-seat cinema, and that summer, it had just been upgraded to be able to show 70 millimeter prints with a 6,000-watt, 50-speaker THX sound system. I, too, first saw THX sound, first saw a movie in THX sound, actually the same movie that you're about to talk about. That was my first experience with THX sound in a theater. 70 millimeter prints with 6,000 watts, 50 speaker THX sound system. So, in that first summer of going to the movies in the big city, being 1986, the first film that I saw in 70 millimeter THX was Top Gun. Talk about a baptism by fire, or at least danger. I remember coming out, seeing that movie in glorious 70 millimeter with thunderous THX surround sound, and my head was still buzzing from the feeling of what I had just experienced. From then on, I was hooked. And until the end of 1986, I subsequently saw the following movies in this theater. Cobra, Invaders from Mars, that would be directed by Tobe Hooper, Big Trouble in Little China, Aliens, The Fly, and Crocodile Dundee. And to cap the year off, just before the holidays, we saw Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, and that did it for me. I was to become a lifelong lover of cinema, especially genre movies. Live long and prosper, Elaine. What a great letter. I mean, this is one of those things where, you know, in the case of Elaine, you know, growing up in a town with showing 16 millimeter prints, you know, they showed those in our junior high and junior high auditoriums when I was growing up. So what a cool thing to get your car. What a great, first of all, the rite of passage of being able to drive is big enough already, but to go to the big city and fall in love with movies because you see them presented on the big screen in thunderous THX sound. I mean, that is the way to go. That is the way to do things. Now, after getting this letter, I wanted to sort of, it made me realize, because I too saw the first Top Gun was the first movie I saw it at the Grand. I want to say I didn't see it in Linwood. I don't remember exactly the theater I went to. I mean, I know where it is, but I forget the name of it. It's in Seattle, but I saw Top Gun in THX sound. That was the first movie I'd seen in THX sound, which was amazing. But I wanted to go back to the year of 1986 because that's the year that Top Gun came out. That's also the year that 20th Century Fox had its great genre. They were advertising that summer. They had Big Trouble in Little China coming out, Aliens coming out, and The Fly coming out, and they were cross-promoting them. And that was like a big deal. Now, the highest grossing films for the year 1986, Top Gun was number one with $176,781,728. Number two, Crocodile Dundee with $174 million, followed up by number three, Platoon, made $138 million. Number four was, get this, The Karate Kid Part 2 with $115 million. And number five was Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, with $109 million domestic gross. Also following up behind Star Trek IV was Back to School, Aliens, The Golden Child, Ruthless People, and number 10 on that top 10 list of box office grosses of 1986 was, in fact, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I'll give you a bit of the Academy Awards. The Academy Awards that year, which were given on March 30th, 1987. The Academy Awards for 1986, Best Film was Platoon. Best Director was Oliver Stone for Platoon. Best Actor was Paul Newman in The Color of Money. Best Actress was Marlee Matlin in Children of a Lesser God. The Best Supporting Actor was Hannah and Her Sisters. Best Supporting Actress was Diane Wiest for Hannah and Her Sisters. The Best Screenplay Award was given to A Room with a View by Ruth Prower Jabavla. That was I love that movie, by the way, A Room with a View. The best screenplay was Hannah and Her Sisters by Woody Allen, and the best foreign language film was Fons Rodemaker's The Assault from Holland. So I'm gonna just go through the year 1986, and I'm gonna read some of my favorite movies, or some not my favorite, but the films that were most notable in 1986, at least for me. Black Moon Rising, Clan of the Cave Bear, My Chauffeur, Down and Out in Beverly Hills, Youngblood, FX, Hannah and Her Sisters, The Delta Force, Parting Glances, 9.5 Weeks, a true favorite, The Hitcher, Pretty in Pink, Salvador, Highlander, of course, Crossroads, which I loved, Rad, just because Rad's still one of my favorite words, Lucas, Band of the Hand, Critters. Can you believe that? At Close Range, 8 Million Ways to Die, Short Circuit, Top Gun, of course, Cobra, Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, Invaders from Mars, Space Camp, Raw Deal, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Back to School, Never Too Young to Die, where George Lazenby came back and played a pseudo James Bond, Karate Kid Part 2, American Anthem, Running Scared, Ruthless People, About Last Night, Big Trouble in Little China, The Great Mouse Detective, Psycho 3, Prince's first movie as a director, Under the Cherry Moon, probably should have been his last, but I kind of like it. Aliens, Vamp, Heartburn, Maximum Overdrive, Stephen King's one and only directorial film. Robotech the movie came out. Nothing in Common, Flight of the Navigator, Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, Howard the Duck, One Crazy Summer, Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It, The Fly, Michael Mann's Manhunter, Stand By Me, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, River's Edge, Blue Velvet, Down by Law, The Name of the Rose, The Boy Who Could Fly, Crocodile Dundee, Half Moon Street. And there you go. Not a bad lineup of studio movies, very diverse. So that was 1986. And I think probably a pretty good year for movies, all in all. And, you know, I think some have gone on to classic status. I liked Fox kind of co-branding Big Trouble, Aliens, and The Fly. Of course, Aliens and The Fly were hits. Big Trouble was not, but it's still gone on to be a classic in its own right. And I do love the fact that going to the cinema in the summer of 86, with the advent of THX sound, it had to be pretty exciting going from a 16 millimeter mono theater to going to a theater with thunderous surround sound like that. Mark C says, my first movie was in 1976. Oh, by the way, before I read Mark's letter, do you know what Disney also re-released in 1986? Believe it or not. Song of the South. That's right. Song of the South was re-released in 1986, almost 40 years after it came out. So even as late as 1986, Disney was releasing Song of the South in movie theaters, which is pretty interesting. By the way, I wanted to mention that at the end of last show, when I was jumping off, Gary Beekler from Nerdrotic sent me a super chat. I didn't get to it because I didn't see it. And so Nerdrotic, Gary said, later, RMB, I DM'd you, see you at SDCC. So I guess I will see Gary Beekler. I look forward to meeting him. As you all know, I do watch Nerdrotic stuff. I like the channel, and I'll be looking forward to meeting Gary face to face. I'll buy him a Diet Coke. Mark C says, my first movie was in 1976. It was a re-release of The Great Waldo Pepper with Robert Redford, Susan Sarandon, and Bo Severinsen. That's a pretty cool movie to see. I saw The Great Waldo Pepper. I like The Great Waldo Pepper. That's kind of a cool movie to be one of your first movies that you remember. Stubble McShave says, Rosalind Chow in the Mulan trailer made me think of her in TNG and Deep Space Nine. The portrayal of her marriage with O'Brien shows how to do representation right. It's true, as everyone knows, Keiko O'Brien was Asian, and of course, O'Brien was Irish. But yes, I mean, they never made mention that it was. I mean, in the future, you know, when a Vulcan can marry a human, all bets are off. Anybody can marry anybody. That's what representation truly is, I think, which is pretty cool. So yes, Stubble, thank you for that one. Now let's see what I got next. I got more letters. I got 2 letters actually from Romania, from our man in Romania. And I guess I'll read them both, because why not? I can read them both, and I think I will. Actually, this one, these are not, that was not correct. Let me get to the correct letters. This one comes from Romania. Our friend Catalan Kit writes, hi, Mr. Burnett. I'm back with a new letter, and this time it's a different animal here. As you know, in my first letter, I came out with guns blazing, but now I'm coming humbled and apologetic. And this is why. As I've said before, your live chats are online at 2 a.m. in my time zone, and I can't be online at this time, unfortunately, so I have to make up with my letters. I've sent you a few letters now, but the first I've written got to be online the next day, and that was nice because you got to read it. You have to know that I understand you get a lot of letters, a few better than others, and fewer that coincide with your topic for the day. I do understand that, but you did read my first letter the next day, and I loved that you did that because I got the feeling that you guys are hearing me. But there's a but. None of my other letters got mentioned until today. Because I have some idea about advertising, because I worked in advertising for 12 years, I thought that you only mentioned my first letter because of the fact that it came from a different weird country and a different continent, and it's good for advertising. And yes, I do apologize for judging you fast and unfairly. And yes, you remain a good guy. Laugh out loud. Might I suggest something? It's a small idea that came from my experience. Because you get so many letters and it's becoming impossible for you to read them all, I think that it will be beneficial to your stream to mention this. Mention some names, even a few short responses like, yes, I did see that movie and I loved it. Yes, I hear you, bro. This is a place for people that want to be heard and a place where they are. So in doing this, all of us that don't get their letters read on the stream get to know that at least you have read them. And considering the fact that they are addressed to you, well, you get the point. This letter is mostly addressed to you, so you don't have to do more than read it if time permits. You can read it live if you consider if it has any value to your stream. Like always, best regards from Romania. P.S. I'm still watching your older streams on YouTube. Did you notice that most of them have around 3 or 4 unlikes? You have some 3 or 4 admirers that do watch you every stream. PS2. I wanted to officially join the Post-Geek Singularity by having a subscription of $12 a year, but I can't. And yeah, I don't use PayPal. I have a Visa credit card and it has $12 on it. Come on, man. Don't make my life harder than it already is. That comes from Catalan. Well, Catalan, that was another great letter. And by the way, I think I've read more than one of your letters. I've read a couple of your letters. And, you know, it's funny. I don't, there's a lot of people that write me letters about, oh, my favorite movie, or I do read them all. And the thing is, what you have to understand is some letters just are written to me and they're just telling me something or they're sharing something with me and they're not necessarily a topic of conversation. But I think your point is correct. I mean, maybe I should just start mentioning everybody's letters who have written to me, but now I'm starting to get so many letters, it's tough. But I don't think that's a bad idea. And something else, while I am touched and flattered, I love the fact that I have an international audience and I get letters from all over the world. I don't choose people's letters specifically because of the country they come from. I do like the fact that this is an international audience. I don't deny that. I think having an international audience is great. And I think it proves my theory of what the post-geek singularity is. And that you know, as somebody who's traveled quite extensively, not nearly as extensively as I would like, but as somebody who's traveled around and lived in different places around the world for periods of time, I think, you know, it's really important that people realize that the planet Earth is full of greatly interesting, unique people, and that we're way more similar to one another than we are different. And that's why I like getting international letters, because even internationally, I still get letters about the same things that we here, we imagination connoisseurs from the Post-Geek Singularity, enjoy. So, but I do think that's a really good idea about reading other people's letters, or even just acknowledging that they wrote in. I don't disagree with that. And I will perhaps address more of those things. So that's a good idea. And that's the thing. I mean, again, if I think somebody has a good idea or something, I'm not going, and even if they have, if you want to criticize me or you want to take me up on something, and I have no problem with that. As a matter of fact, I encourage it. So go to the Burnettwork.net, send me a letter. And if you want to join, another great point is we have to figure out, I guess, how to take credit cards as well, which is probably a good thing. James M has written a quick one in of something I didn't know about. James M says, this letter would be something I would put in a live chat or send as a super chat. However, given that I still haven't been able to watch live, I will send this letter in its place. Like the rest of the Post-Geek Singularity, I love Star Trek. So in an attempt to help out anyone trying to watch through all the shows and movies like myself, I would advise using an app called Trek Marathon Tracker. By the way, I've never heard of this. I'm an Inglorious Trexpert, by the way, and our latest Inglorious Trexperts episode dropped yesterday with an interview with Jeffrey Combs. Wayoon Brunt. Jeffrey Combs is a legend. It's a great actor, and it was great having him on. So if you like podcasts, look up the Inglorious Trexperts podcast, And this episode is, in fact, co-starring, or our guest is Jeff Combs. So check that out. So you've got the Trek Marathon Tracker. To my knowledge, not a sponsor. They are not a sponsor of this show. It has information about every movie and show up through Discovery Season 1. Well, James, I've never heard of that before, but I'm going to get that app just to see. The Trek Marathon Tracker. What a cool thing. I did not know that even existed. So I'm going to get that. Absolutely. I think that would be most excellently cool. So why not? Why not do that? The post, that's really cool. I don't even know that somebody made this. Here's another letter from a guy who writes me all the time now, Dan Skip Allen. It's almost like I'm getting one every day, but I wanted to read this because he talks about Spider-Man Far From Home. I don't know if this is a spoiler letter, so be warned if you haven't seen Spider-Man Far From Home yet. Hey, Rob, I'm going to fanboy out in this letter. It's regarding Spider-Man Far From Home. Please go with me on this and comment if you feel like it at the end. Thanks. Okay, here goes. Quentin Beck mentions Earth 316 and 846, I think. I totally know they disproved this during the movie, so don't worry about that. We do know, though, that the alternate Earths do exist due to the events in Avengers Endgame. If a future Spider-Man villain found a way to travel to multiple Earths, could he or she round up Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, Alfred Molina as Otto Octavius, Thomas Hayden Church Sandman, Rise Eye fans as Dr. Kurt Connors, Michael Keaton as Adrian Toomes, and Quentin Beck as Mysterio, otherwise known as the Sinister Six? I know this is a stretch. Maybe Mysterio could return and find a way to do this himself. Who knows? Do you have any thoughts on this or ways Marvel and Sony could do this, if at all? I know I'm totally spiraling and fanboying out, but that's what's fun about being a fan film or a film fan. We can speculate on our favorite films or characters. Thanks, Rob. Talk to you later. Dan Skip Allen. Well, I mean, as we saw in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the animated, which I believe is now on Netflix, that is a possibility. I definitely think that could happen. There's nothing to prevent it from happening. It would be hard to get all those actors together, I think, but you could definitely do it if you needed to. But there's not so much as multiple Earths like you mentioned the number Earth 316. I don't think that's right. 846. That's a comic thing. The Marvel universe, there's quantum theory. I don't think that there's any alternate Earths. There's only quantum. It's different. Alternate universes are different than quantum. I don't know how I would put this. So I know that's sort of, I'm splitting hairs there, but going through the quantum realm is different than traveling through dimensions to different Earths, I think. Now, somebody who's more well-versed in quantum theory than myself could probably explain that. But in it's different than the multiverse. Traveling through the quantum realm is different than the multiverse, isn't it? I think. Because if there's a multiverse, there's fixed Earths where these alternate Earths exist. They can have different pasts, different histories. They can be mirror realms, whatever they are. They're actually different Earths. Whereas if you travel through the quantum realm, you're going through different iterations of our Earth. I think that's how I would understand it, or that's how at least I've understood it. So Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, you're not going through the quantum realm. You're actually going into different realities, different Earths that exist. Whereas traveling through the quantum realm, you're going through different versions of our reality. Right? I think it's these questions. These have vexed imagination connoisseurs for years. So I don't know if I'm correct. You guys, if you want to object to what I'm saying here and tell me I'm wrong, I am perfectly willing to admit that I am wrong. So yeah, I mean, there you go. I don't know what you think about that, but that's kind of how I understood it. So anyway, yeah. And that actually was the letters that I received today. So there was not a lot of letters from you guys because it's a holiday weekend, and I totally understand that. Willow Yang is actually here. Willow Yang says, is it just me, or does Chekhov look a little different in the animated series? Well, Chekhov has been reassigned during the animated series. He is not aboard the Enterprise. Walter Koenig did not. He did not come back as Chekhov. He does write an episode called The Infinite Vulcan. Chekhov was replaced by Mr. Erex, and they also added Lieutenant Mores, who is a Cation, a cat species, to the crew, which is sort of strange. But hey, we get Mr. Erex. We actually get a three-armed alien on the bridge. Isn't that cool? I think it's pretty cool. Wade O'Neill is here. Wade O'Neill says, best albums of 1986. Iron Maiden, Somewhere in Time, Fate's Warning, Awaken the Guardian, King Diamond, Fatal Portrait, Crimson Glory, self-titled. Great year. Sadly, I was only 4 at the time. You know what, Wade? Even though you were 4, it appears you were banging your head even back then. And I appreciate that, because anybody that mentions King Diamond, come on, in 86, by then I was totally not into that kind of music. I was not a headbanger. I wasn't really that into metal. I've always loved Iron Maiden though. I think in 1986, the Cult's album Love came out, which became one of my favorite records of the year. Let's check that, shall we? Let's check if the Cult's album Love came out in 1986. I believe it did. Oh, I'm wrong. It actually came out in October of 85. I did not get it until deep into 86, but there you go. It was recorded in July and August of 85. It was released in October of 85. I probably didn't have it until, because I bought the import. So I didn't know. It came out on Beggar's Banquet in 85. I probably bought it at Tower Records in the import bin. So maybe I did get it, but at least I got it at the end of 85. But that was what I was listening to in 86. Man, I love that record. As anyone who knows, who's seen Free Enterprise, one of my favorite songs of all time is She Sells Sanctuary, which is a great song. David Galvez says, hey, RB, I picked up Marvel's The Remastered Edition. A while ago, you told me to check this out for my first comic. Hope this is the run that you told me about. It sounds like it. If it's Marvel's, you'll know if it's Alex Ross, his painted artwork, the remastered edition. Well, hang on. Allow me to check and make sure. And I'll tell you in a flash. Let's see. Marvel's The Remastered Edition. Yes, indeed, sir. That is the book that I was telling you about. That's fantastic. And it has 4.5 stars out of 5. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I don't have this. I should get this. It came out November 20th, 2018. So the end of last year. And it looks great. Looks good to me. What a great cover. But have you read it yet? It's one of the great. I think you're going to love it. If you anybody who hasn't read Marvel's, it's one of those great. I was talking about a gateway. Marvel's is definitely a comic gateway. Once you start reading it, you're going to be locked in. Muckbang Reviews says Under the Cherry Moon was bad, but the soundtrack was great. Yes, the soundtrack to Under the Cherry Moon was the Prince album Parade, and I am a huge fan of that record. It's definitely, Under the Cherry Moon is definitely a guilty pleasure. Prince directed it. It was shot in black and white. Kristen Scott Thomas is in it. Jerome is, of course, in it. I have a lot of love for it. And that album is truly incredible. What a great record. Christopher Tracy's Parade. Sometimes It Snows in April, one of my favorite Prince songs of all time. It's amazing. Jim Boyers is here. Detective Jim said, thank your buddy John. His never-ending pandering for Lucifer finally wore me down. It has consumed my last 3 days. Holy hell, it is good. Holy hell, pun intended. Well, Jim, I'm glad you like. First of all, how great is the guy who plays Lucifer? He's so great. That show is really, if you guys haven't watched Lucifer, It's a lot of fun. And Netflix has revived it for this season, and I believe the 5th season. This is the 4th season, and they're gonna do a final 5th season. What I love about Lucifer is it is actually based on the iteration of the character that Neil Gaiman wrote in Sandman, my favorite comic book, Lucifer Morningstar. And I love the Lucifer character as he was written by Neil Gaiman in Sandman, and I do like the show. Alexander Wilson's here. Hello, sir. Alexander Wilson asks, what's your opinion on Spider-Man Far From Home? I loved Spider-Man Far From Home. I wish it was, they talk about how they cut out a lot of the beginning of Peter preparing to go on his trip. I know they wanted to get to Europe pretty quickly, but I could have used 10 more minutes of decompression from Endgame and seeing more of the world and the blip. But I really liked it a lot. I thought it was wildly entertaining. Now, what's interesting is I've been reading a lot of online punditry about Spider-Man Far From Home, which has been sort of strange to me. A lot of people's reactions to it. Like I don't think I love the relationships. I loved the relationship Peter has with Aunt May, and I love the relationship with Happy, and I loved MJ and all of his friends. I really loved all that, and I really loved how they incorporated all of the events in what's been happening in the Marvel Cinematic Universe into Spider-Man. And like as a lot of people said, this is sort of a palate cleanser. This was more of a sorbet or something that you eat. It was the dessert. I see it as the dessert to the Infinity Saga. And a lot of people are saying, like, well, did Tony Stark intend Peter Parker to be the next Iron Man? I don't think so. I mean, I can't speak for Tony Stark, but I think that Tony Stark saw a purity in what Spider-Man was doing. I don't think that Tony Stark was ever going to expect Spider-Man to lead the Avengers, because he's a kid after all. But what he did expect Peter Parker to do was live up to an ideal. The ideal that the Avengers were aspiring to, that Peter Parker was sort of an uncorruptible soul. And Tony Stark knew that. And by mentoring him and giving him his blessing, he was essentially saying, I know what you are, kid. I know what's in your soul. I know what you can do. And I know the kind of symbol that you will be for people. And that's what he expected him to be, not to replace Iron Man. I mean, Peter Parker was obviously is scientifically very adept. He's a very smart kid, but he's not ever going to be the captain of industry that Tony Stark was. He's not going to know as many things as Tony Stark. He'll know a lot of things, but he's a different character. He's a different animal. And like Peter Parker said, Peter Parker he wants to be the neighborhood Spider-Man, not your friendly neighborhood Earth Spider-Man. Although when called upon, he will do those things. I loved all of that. I love the whole thing with Mysterio. I love the relationship Quentin Beck had with Peter Parker. And unfortunately, some of his innocence was taken away by that, because he'll know not to be as trusting with people in the future. I really enjoyed the European milieu. And, I was talking to John Campy about this, about the nitpicking of the holographic imagery, like Quentin Beck couldn't fly. Well, no, he couldn't fly, but he could walk up behind Peter and there could be a holographic image and they could make them meld and things like that. I mean, it didn't bother me, because anybody who's utilizing holographic technology, I mean, it wasn't just not there. They were also able to manipulate. They had weapon systems. They had all kinds of things. And none of that stuff bothered me. I mean, I read a review going, well, was the destruction real? Yes, the destruction was real. It was caused by drones that were blowing shit up. And, when I look at that stuff, I'm able to suspend my disbelief to a certain point. If they give me enough information that I can infer, like, okay, I'll buy that. I'll buy into what you're showing me, and I bought into that. That's called suspension of disbelief. And that movie certainly gave me enough where I wasn't like going, well, wait a minute, I didn't have any. And I do the same thing with time travel. Like, I've seen enough time travel stories that I understand that there's the mechanics of time travel that we just don't understand, and you have to go with it. If they make it believable enough, it's when they don't make it believable enough for me, where I'm like, come on, man. Even in a fictional environment where you're making up science that doesn't actually exist, you have to make it at least plausible. Unlike, say, a spore drive, which has no scientific basis. It makes no sense at all. Even to I can make stuff up, and I'll believe in a lot of things, but you've got to set up for me You have to really make me feel that there's verisimilitude going. And I really enjoyed Spider-Man Far From Home a great deal. Now, is it my favorite Spider-Man movie? No. I'd still have to probably go with Spider-Man 2, even though one of my problems with Raimi's Spider-Man movies was they all seemed to take place in movie New York as opposed to real New York. It always felt like you were looking at a set. Whereas at least the little bits of New York that we see in the Spider-Man movie, and we saw more in Far From Home, I believe these movies in a Homecoming, take place more in the real world, whereas Raimi's movies take place in movie world, if that makes any sense. It probably doesn't, but I think some of you might go with that. But I still think Spider-Man 2 and the relationship that Peter had with Otto Octavius, I mean, it's really interesting that they keep playing this beat of Peter Parker having these mentor figures that betray him. And I understand that because it's hard. It's really kind of hard to Spider-Man stories. There have been interesting Spider-Man stories, but it's really, I think, hard, especially it's hard to translate a Spider-Man story to the big screen and make it big screen worthy. It's hard to do that. I think that's why they're having such a hard time cracking a Flash movie. Because basically the Flash runs really fast, okay, and he can vibrate and do things. But how do you, and they've done it on the TV show, but look at how often they've relied on alternate universes and things like that in the Flash TV series. And I think it's really hard without a sort of a wide array of secondary characters. It's hard to come up with a great Flash story, which is why they've had such a hard time. A great Flash story for the big screen, which is why just because something works as a comic book story doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate to the big screen. But I really did enjoy Spider-Man Far From Home a lot. I did. Alexander follows up and says, I felt that Far From Home didn't have emotional weight. There was more emotion in the Skrull story in Captain Marvel than anything in Spider-Man. Well, I don't know. I mean, it depends how you look at it. I really enjoyed the weight of the world that Peter felt on himself. I mean, I guess it's something it's more esoteric than it is directly story related as opposed to being plot driven. But I understood where he was coming from. I mean, it's the same thing. Look, with great power comes great responsibility. That famous line that Uncle Ben had said, I think that's what this entire movie, Spider-Man Far From Home, was all about. Spider-Man's mission statement and how he was going to move forward. How did he want to move forward? What was he expected to do? That Tony Stark gave him all of this trust, but for what purpose? I mean, where is Spider-Man's place in the world after Tony Stark has died? And what's funny is when I watch these movies, I'm not watching these Spider-Man films thinking what's going on in the comics. I'm looking at the Spider-Man movies as they're now a function of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And while I think Marvel has been very smart by looking to their comic book origins, such as the Winter Soldier, such as the Age of Ultron, those stories, while they're jumping off point, they're not exact translations of those comic book storylines. Civil War was a great idea, but within the confines of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, rather than be about the greater universe and what the X-Men and the Fantastic Four are doing, they were able to make the movie about the conflict between Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. And I thought that's a great way to go. That's how you make great films. And while they're different from the comics, I like what they're doing. And the way they've gone with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's just another look at Spider-Man's character, but from within the confines of that universe. And I really like what they did. I thought what they did was very, very cool. And I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed how they tried to have someone else step up into that Tony Stark mentor role, who ended up turning out to be a douchebag. I mean, and I don't think that's a spoiler by saying that. I mean, Mysterio is a longtime Spider-Man villain. So to think that there wasn't going to be some kind of a interesting twist in the Mysterio character is, I think, somewhat naive. So I don't think by mentioning that it's spoiling anything for anyone, because he's really the only new character they're introducing. David Galvez says, I haven't read Marvels yet. Going to start tonight. You, sir, are in for a treat. Report back. I can't wait to hear what you think of Marvels. It's one of the great. It was actually Marvels was a real turning point in comic books. First of all, Alex Ross's paintings. It really was the thing that put Alex Ross on the map for comics. And after seeing Marvels and the way it sort of examines the Marvel universe from a man on the street perspective, a reporter's perspective, was really interesting. And it's something that we didn't normally take into consideration. And I think when Marvels came out, it really altered people's perceptions. It was one of those things that it was post things like Dark Knight Returns, but it really alters people's perceptions of what a comic book, what a superhero comic book story could be. And now that you make me, I want to know when it came out. So Marvels came out in 1994, and let's see what Wikipedia has to say. Yeah, it's set in the 1939 to 1974 time period. The series examines the Marvel universe from the perspective of an everyman character, news photographer Phil Sheldon. Yeah, so that's interesting, 94. So it was definitely after the 80s wave of comics, but it really sort of, again, changed the perception of how superhero comics were perceived, not just by readers, but also I think by the general public, because it was one of those books that, because of Alex Ross's breakthrough paintings, it really elevated the comic medium, especially specifically the superhero comics medium, to another level. And I think you're really going to enjoy the comic. And it also touches upon a lot of Marvel comic history from a different perspective. So I think you're going to get you're in for a treat. You're in for a treat. And I would imagine carve yourself. It is the summer, so I don't think you're in school, but carve out yourself some time, because you'll want to read that sucker all the way to the end. I think. Wade O'Neill says, how would you introduce the Fantastic Four into the MCU? Maybe Galactus finds them lost in space and the Fantastic Four inadvertently lead them to Earth. Well, you could do it two ways. First of all, the way they introduce characters, like I would say that Reed Richards is friends with Banner. Like they already know each other. We just haven't seen them yet. What's funny is we just haven't gotten around the world, this big place. And the Fantastic Four, I would see that Reed Richards and maybe Tony Stark knew Reed Richards as well. I mean, I'm sure that they did know each other. We just haven't met them, and they're not the Fantastic Four yet. And maybe we could introduce them. You could introduce them as a result of the technology that was developed in Endgame, with the quantum realm technology and being able to travel through time and through different realities. Maybe you have Reed Richards is doing more research on that, and somehow, instead of going up into orbit and they get hit by cosmic radiation or something, maybe the result is a result of them playing with the quantum technology that's been between what Hank Pym had done and what they had done in the extension of that technology in Endgame, that has something to do with the creation of the Fantastic Four, because that all ties in. What they do is the Marvel Cinematic Universe is kind of like the Ultimates universe was in the comics. It's different from the regular Marvel universe. They're establishing their own continuity, and it's informed by the comics. But I think that they could do something like that. Or, like you said, Galactus finds them lost in space, and the Fantastic Four inadvertently lead them back to Earth. I think we're going to see parallel development. We're going to get an Eternals movie. So we're going to deal with the Eternals and the Deviants, and we're going to see a lot more of the cosmic Marvel universe. We've got Captain Marvel. I'm sure they're going to introduce more, whether it's Warlock or more of the Nova Corps or anything like that. It's only a matter of time before Silver Surfer and Galactus become part of all of that. And I can see it all happening. So, but to introduce them, you asked me, how would I introduce the Fantastic Four? I would say that Reed Richards and Sue Storm and Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm are probably known commodities that we have yet to meet, but we're gonna meet them through previously existing characters, I would imagine. Or they're going to be introduced on their own, and then they will realize that they have some connection to previously existing characters. Kind of the way we saw, we met the Vulture cleaning up after the Battle of New York, and getting that Chitauri alien tech. I mean, it's all sort of intertwined, which I think is definitely the way to go. But again, it's difficult to say, but I'm curious to see how they're going to do it. I think, look, even though John Campea disagrees with me, I believe that we've already seen Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch described as miracles, and people say that they were created through the Tesseract technology. Well, after the snap or whatever, maybe the mutant gene, that's how it was activated. And we saw that they were creations of the Tesseract energy. Well, what if that's actually what happened? That we've already seen mutants in the MCU. We just haven't seen them quantified as mutants yet. But because that energy has now affected the whole universe, maybe that's what manifests the mutant gene in the MCU. I don't know that for a fact, although I think it might be very interesting to see something like that take place. But that's how I would do it. I mean, that's how I would sort of approach that. That's the angle that I would come from, I think, because you don't. It's. I don't think it has to be rocket science. I mean, and by the way, however they're going to do it, they've already figured it out. Like, they know. It's not like they're thinking, oh, how are we going to introduce mutants? They know. They've been thinking about it for years. They figured all of that out. I mean, do you think when they were going after Spider-Man that they were just thinking about how can we get Spider-Man from Sony? No, they were thinking about how can we get all of these characters back? And if we get them back, how are we going to incorporate them into the universe? They already know. They have a great way of doing it. Joseph says, Rob, please explain to me why Starfleet ships have the bridge, the most important part of the ship, on top of the ship, the most vulnerable place. Well, because they're ships of exploration. I mean, it wasn't obviously, look, probably from a tactical standpoint, but if you look at ships today, like you look at an aircraft carrier, the aircraft carrier is commanded via the conning tower that's above the flight deck where all the planes take off and land, and that's where they command the ship. It's not deep inside a ship. It's right out there for all to see. And if you shoot a missile at an aircraft carrier and take out the command section, what are you going to do? I guess you can command it from inside the ship. I'm not really up on my aircraft carrier, how it all works. But, when you're in exploration, remember, most of the time that Starfleet vessels, most of Starfleet, they were exploration ships. They weren't built for war. We saw like the Defiant was built for war. But heavy cruisers and all those things, while they can defend themselves, they were basically, because traveling through the cosmos is so difficult in the first place. I think the idea was that you weren't necessarily, when you met intelligent life, you weren't necessarily going to go to war, and so they're not warships; they're ships of exploration. But I understand. I mean, a lot of people say, why are they so vulnerable? Why do you put the bridge? Because we always come at it and thinking it's coming out. The design must have been that we're thinking about conflict. And I think that in the case of starships, that's not what they were designed to be. They were designed to be ships of exploration. Because when you're traveling around the cosmos, it's a lot different. It's not everybody you meet immediately starts shooting. At least I would hope not. Alexander Wilson says, I felt that the Spider-Man movie you described was better than what I saw. I felt like nothing actually happened, and Peter giving Mysterio control over Edith was stupid. It was done to move the story. Lame. Well, I guess I didn't buy necessarily that he was going to give this to Quentin, but he did almost kill his friends using that technology. He didn't mean to, but he did almost kill his friends. And I mean, Quentin Beck was already working with S.H.I.E.L.D. And I think that from Peter's perspective, he's like, I don't need this. He was just given these glasses. It's not something that he'd had for a long time. They were new to him. And they seemed a little like, what am I supposed to do with this? So from my perspective, I understood that, okay, he's found a guy that's out there trying to save the world. And clearly, why he didn't give these over to, say, Nick Fury seemed a little strange to me. But I think you might be right about that. It didn't bother me though, because I understood like where he was coming from and what was going on. Like, think about everything that he'd been through. Think about they talked a lot about in the beginning of the movie, the blip. But he was disintegrated for 5 years. Like, time had jumped. Imagine how disconcerting that would be. And I think they did a really good job where people found out that the younger brothers are now older, that they were older siblings. Who knows how many people who thought their loved ones were dead, they moved on and married other people and maybe even had kids, only to find out their spouse returns thinking, wait a minute. In my mind, it was just a blip. I was gone. I didn't even feel like I disappeared. Something just happened and now I'm back and you're telling me 5 years went by. I mean, I think that, they could have gotten into the psychological ramifications of all that for a long period of time. But they didn't. So for me, all that stuff worked. I was like, okay, because it was more of an intellectual exercise. I found. I mean, I totally accepted where Peter was going, but I mean, I could have watched a movie of Peter just dealing for 2 hours, dealing with the aftermath of what the world was like, and his whole ennui, his existential angst was derived from the fact that he is only a neighborhood Spider-Man, and yet he knows what's out there. He's been on Titan. He's seen Thanos. He knows the world was destroyed. Like how do you, or decimated, half the world was decimated. How do you as a person come to grips with this? And if you're trying to be a hero, I love the line when he said, what does he say? I'm just trying to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. How does he ever go back to being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, knowing what kind of threats exist in the universe? And I really thought that I was really into that. And of course, it's still a Spider-Man movie, and I know I'm probably reading into it a lot more than is there. But I think what's really interesting is I talked to a lot of people that are either they didn't get the movie they wanted, or the movie they wanted wasn't quite as, say, exciting as they wanted it to be, and all of that. And I think that when I watch a movie, I'm trying to find things in it that I like. I do. Even if a movie, I'm more looking for things that I want to like, or things that I think are interesting than things that bother me. I mean, I really go into things trying to love them. And I love this movie for that reason, because I was trying to put myself in Peter's mindset. Like, I kept asking myself, what do you do when you did go into space? Like when Nick Fury says, Nick Fury, bitch, please, you've been to space. I mean, I loved it. That was to me the crux of the film. Like, once you've been to space, how are you a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man? And that to me was, I'm like, yeah, what do you do? And then he's given all this technology and he gets involved on his European vacation. He can't even just go out with his friends. He suddenly gets pulled into Nick Fury's craziness and the elemental craziness, which turns out to be crazier than he even thought. And that's what he winds up with. And I'm like, I liked all that, but I understand it wasn't your typical, that story and the story of the main action beats of the film were not necessarily one and the same. So I can understand, like, I was reading more into it, I think, than a lot of people did. So for me, it really worked. I thought it was really, really interesting. And I was surprised at how much of that it touched upon, which I thought was surprising and cool, actually. But yeah, and obviously audiences are flocking to it, and it seems to be doing pretty well. And that's really good, I think, for everybody. It's good when a superhero movie, a genre movie of any kind, is doing well. And of course, now everyone was talking about how we had a crappy summer season at the movies, but now we're almost equal with the box office that we had last year, and we still have Lion King on the horizon. So that's pretty exciting stuff to see what we've got coming. And it's great when movies are healthy. I know they're franchise properties and we're remakes and all that, but it is pretty good whenever we can see movies that people embrace and people love. So I think that is a good thing. It's always a good thing. So yeah. Let's see what you guys have to say. Otter Vomit says, when the saucer section comes off the bridge of the Enterprise, the battle bridge is at the top of the neck. Yes, that is true. That is absolutely true. Like, what do you do? I mean, it's again, like they call it the battle bridge. Um, yeah, I mean, it's again. I don't think that Starfleet vessels were ever designed necessarily to be warships, and even though they end up being in conflicts. But look, even Klingon battle cruisers, the Cobra head, that's what the bridge of the Klingon battle cruisers are. And I know that's because, Klingons don't shy away from battle, but from a tactical standpoint, and I think it also has something to do with the fact that if they buried well, I don't know. I can't get into a Star Trek tactical discussion because it would take hours and hours and hours. I'd go down a rabbit hole. Alexander Wilson says, sorry for the Spider-Man spoilers. I thought Toy Story 4 was a superior movie, and that Toy Story ending had my girlfriend crying in the theater. Well, it's true. The Toy Story movies, I mean, Toy Story 3 was to me packed an emotional wallop, but they're different kinds of movies. I don't necessarily think Spider-Man Far From Home, I found it interesting. It didn't make me want to cry. Endgame made me want to cry even more, but I don't think that Spider-Man Far From Home was supposed to have that. But I did enjoy the movie, and I did enjoy what they were trying to do and what they did do in the film. I really did. But listen, the Toy Story movies and the Pixar movies in general they really know how to tug the heartstrings, and they're always going, even like Coco. I've talked famously about how, well, I wasn't famous about it, but I didn't see Coco when it came out. I didn't have much of an interest to see it. I got no understanding of what the movie was really even about. I didn't have an intellectual reason in my mind to go see it, but I did buy the Blu-ray because I buy all of Pixar's Blu-rays sight unseen. Like, I hadn't seen Inside Out in the theater, but I bought it. When I saw Coco, I was blown away. I was totally blown away, and I'm like, why do I ever not go see Pixar movies in the theater? But they're magicians there, and the way that they probably make some of the most, I mean, Studio Ghibli as well, but they do a different kind of thing. But the Toy Story movies, man, they really know how to tug the heartstrings, and it's pretty amazing what they're able to do. So kudos to them. By the way, one thing I didn't mention today, kudos to the U.S. women's soccer team for winning the FIFA World Cup, Women's Soccer World Cup today for their fourth time. They tied a lot of people, men's and women's. Not a lot of people have won 4 World Cups. I think there's only one team that's won 5, like Brazil or something. So kudos to the Women's World Cup team for winning today over the Netherlands. Nice victory, ladies. Well done. That's something to be admired. Fantastic. So I know that not a lot of Americans are into football, or at least worldwide football, not our football, but we call it soccer. I've never understood that. I mean, I guess that's because we have our own football, but it's sort of funny because I do enjoy watching soccer. The athletes always blow me away running up and down that field. That huge field. I mean, my God, it's crazy. Noob Master 69 asks a really big spoiler question that I can't answer directly, but I'm going to answer it. I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe did one of the coolest things they possibly could have done in Spider-Man Far From Home in terms of relating to the history of the Spider-Man character on screen. I think it was a ballsy choice. I think it was the only choice, and I loved it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to see where it goes. Kudos to them, and what a treat that was. Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. So yeah, I'm into it. Joseph asks, why is American football called football? It boggles my mind. They barely touch the ball with the foot itself, unlike real football where they kick the ball with the foot 99% of the match. Look, this is an American thing. I don't understand it. It's crazy to me. But there you go. I don't know. Well, Noob Master says nicely done. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That was my non-spoiler answer. That's about all I could muster. Well, everyone, this is a quick chat today. It's only an hour today, but I'm going to bring this chat to an end. I want to thank everybody for being here. First of all, I want to say shout out to my moderators, Terry, Jim, Greg, and Mike. For those who could be here and those who couldn't, I really appreciate the job the moderators do. I want to thank all of you imagination connoisseurs, members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, for not only supporting the channel, but supporting one another. This is probably one of the most hospitable geek websites or audience. The audience of this website is probably one of the most hospitable and nicest on the web. I can't speak for every website because I don't go to them all, but man, you guys are the best. I want to thank you for being that way. We're heading into Comic-Con. Comic-Con is not this week. It's next week. Very exciting. Marvel has said that they're going to have a 90-minute panel. The last time they had a 90-minute panel, I lost my mind. Tom Hiddleston came out in full Loki garb. He might do it this time, too, because he's got something to promote. They're probably going to give us the definitive information dump about what's happening with the MCU for the next few years going forward. Very excited. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't unveil, if not a trailer, but footage for Black Widow, because why not? Amazing. So that's very exciting. I want to thank Lucky Tiger, for those men who want to look good and feel great, for continuing to sponsor this channel. I want to remind you all, you can watch the latest episodes of Living the Lucky Tiger Life on the Robservations channel. I'll be dropping more of those. There's going to be more stuff coming down the pike. I'll probably be working on the first Viewer's Choice episode again today. But yeah, it's all good. And I want to thank you all for being here. It's a great channel with you guys all here, because it wouldn't be a great channel without you here. So anyway, I want to say enjoy your Sunday. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And as always, I say, have a better day.